Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to my presentation. I was here last year talking about anti-home rule postcards, and I'm back this year talking about a very different topic, and that's Rory Gallagher, the Irish rock and blues musician. And specifically, I'm talking about some research that I conducted on the Rory Gallagher YouTube channel and how fans express Irishness. I want to caveat my presentation by saying that I'm an absolutely huge fan of Rory Gallagher. And so when I was practicing this presentation, it felt really strange for me to call him by his surname. So I'm going to be referring to him as Rory throughout. So just to provide a little bit of background for my study, as I'm sure you all know, YouTube is a global video sharing platform, and it has comment sections that encourage a participatory culture and enable people from all around the world to leave feedback and opinions. For music videos, comment sections are a chance for fans to express their fandom and develop a sense of group membership and identity based around a certain musician. And research has found that when musicians come from small countries or countries with complex political histories, these expressions of identity can be particularly important. This is not necessarily politically motivated. Often it's more about drawing attention to a country that's often been neglected on the international stage. So I decided to explore this within the context of Ireland, and specifically looking at Rory Gallagher, who has really not been looked at all in academic work to date. So to tell you a bit more about the YouTube channel, it was set up in 2010, and it currently has about 30,000 subscribers and 226 videos. So I collected all of the comments from these videos, and then I looked at a subset of 1,000 comments, and specifically at the strategies that Irish and non-Irish fans use to adopt these public displays of Irishness, express personal links with Ireland and Irish culture, and to situate themselves as authentic fans. So what is Irishness? Well, defining Irishness is a centuries-old problem. It's often split into a dichotomy between good and bad. Bad being the Irishness tied up with issues of race, religion and politics, and good being an Irishness that fosters cultural diversity and embraces its differences of opinion. More recently, particularly since the 1990s and the period of Celtic Tigerism, Irishness has been seen as a transnationalist trait and a kind of idealized ethnicity, and Negra describes it today as a performative and mobile notion. For many musicians, Irishness is extremely important, and research has been conducted in this area with such people as Van Morrison, Phil Lynott, The Pogues, U2, Horselips, and Christy Moore. And they found that Irishness tends to be deeply hybrid, and it often operates in tensions with and can be critical of dominant ideas of national identity. Recently, O'Flynn has called for more attention to be paid to fans, and particularly the settings, genres, social groups and values of fans, because they tend to foster this insider-outsider dichotomy of national identity. So by shifting the focus to listeners, we can gain a better understanding of the complex nature of Irishness and how it is interpreted, adapted and recontextualized by fans. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, I've chosen to do this within the context of Rory Gallagher because he's been vastly overlooked in academic literature. So I thought it was important to provide a bit of background on Rory Gallagher for those of you who aren't familiar with him. And if you're not, I would definitely recommend you checking out some of his music after this presentation. So Rory grew up with a foot in both camps. His father Daniel was from County Derry, and his mother Monica was from County Cork. And Rory himself was born in Ballyshannon in County Donegal in 1948. As a young child, Rory moved to Derry, and then after his parents' separation, he moved to Cork with his mother Monica and his younger brother Donal. So already as a child, Rory was exposed to these two sides of Ireland, the nationalist and the unionist, the Catholic and the Protestant. Rory himself was a Catholic and attended the Christian Brothers School. And he was exposed to blues music from a young age after listening to the American Forces Network radio. At 9, he got his first guitar, and at 15, he became a professional musician, joining the show band The Fontana and travelling all over Ireland, the North and the Republic, with them. In 1966, Rory formed his own band, Taste, with 2 Protestants, and they moved to Belfast, where they were hugely successful. After the band split in 1970, Rory went solo, but he would continue to use Northern Irish and Protestant musicians throughout his career. Rory never publicly expressed his opinion on the Troubles, nor did he write politically motivated songs. He kept his views to himself, but his opinions on Ireland were often channeled subtly, like through the 1974 Irish Tour documentary. In this film, it focuses heavily on the geography, architecture and culture of County Cork, and Ireland is portrayed in a historical, quasi-mystical way, made up of small-town communities with traditional values. Rory went on to live in London, but he often described that he was living there as an exile and that he missed Ireland. He had a strong Cork accent, which he kept throughout his life, and he still attended Mass on a regular basis. So his feeling of Irishness was very strong, but also it was cosmopolitan and multi-layered, made up of his experiences in the North and in the Republic. Although he didn't emphasize his Irishness, though, it has surprisingly become a core aspect of fans' identity. And as I'll show in this study, this isn't really related to nationalist identity. It's more about expressing authentic fandom and love for a man who did so much for uniting the North and the Republic of Ireland through his music. So all of the comments were subjected to a detailed content analysis in order to tease out key themes. And I should mention that for ethical reasons, all of the comments were anonymized, and I have changed their wording slightly so that none of the participants' identities can be traced back. And the first theme that I did identify was Irish transnationalism and regionalism. So studies on fandom have found that structures of power and hierarchy are inevitable, and that often these structures of power are based around longevity and knowledge. So fans who have been fans for longer and fans who have the most knowledge of the musician are seen as most authentic and gain cultural capital amongst their peers. However, interestingly, on the Rory Gallagher YouTube channel, it's Irishness that is the key trait for fans. So fans who are Irish or have some connection with Ireland are automatically given the upper hand over other fans who are non-Irish and can't claim this. And this is carried out in various different ways that I've got up on the screen here and I'll talk through now. So the first is the use of personal pronouns, we, us, our. So Rory, our national treasure, our finest talent, our cream of the crop. All of these expressions serve to portray a sense of commonality and rapport between Irish fans and Rory, while simultaneously distinguishing themselves from non-Irish fans and therefore gaining status within the community. However, as I said at the beginning, these expressions of national identity aren't political, and they can be seen more as a playful nationalism, because they go beyond its traditional associations and instead they allow fans to express pride in their home country and by the same token by the musician that comes from there. But we see non-Irish fans making this claim for transnational identity, so things like Rory made us all Irish, Rory was actually a global treasure. So here nationality is not a source of conflict for the non-Irish fans, rather they value the section of the comments as a space for cosmopolitan engagement, and it's an opportunity for them to talk to authentic fans who come from Ireland and have first-hand knowledge and experience of the country. Something else that we often see is the use of the Irish plus a noun, so the Irish wizard, the Irish hurricane, the Irish titan, the Irish gem. And again, these are all powerful attributes that frame Ireland positively, and they serve to create these transnational bonds across the fan community that centre around an idealised and romanticised notion of Irishness. We also see examples of the use of the Irish language, and I'm not going to try and pronounce these because unfortunately I don't speak Irish, but these expressions tend to be quite standard set expressions that are, goodbye, rest in peace, I love you, I miss you. But in other cases, users appear to hide behind Irish's status as a minority language to articulate feelings and emotions that perhaps they don't want to show in English because these will be more widely recognised. So in this way, Irish is used almost like a diary entry where they can secretly express their feelings and emotions about Rory, but kind of in the safe confines of knowing that most other people aren't going to understand what they're saying. We also see examples of cultural references used by Irish fans. So they quote traditional songs, traditional poems, and here, by doing so, they're involved in a process of intertextualization. So they take the cultural reference from one context and they recontextualize it in a new context. And the success of the resignification hinges upon other fans recognizing the comments and where they've come from. So here on the screen, the innocent and the beautiful have no enemy but time, when Irish eyes are smiling. And another thing which I found really interesting was invented proverbs. So Irish people producing meaning by drawing on existing cultural structures, but developing them to reproduce knowledge, humour and authenticity. So we have a saying here in Ireland, first there was Jesus, then there was Rory. Or as we say here in Ireland, Rory could make his guitar talk. There are also sources of tension for fans, and this can be between Irish and non-Irish fans, but also more generally, just things that annoy fans of Rory Gallagher. So one of them is calling Rory the Irish version of other guitar virtuosos, so the Irish Hendrix, the Irish Clapton, the Irish Page. And this gets Irish fans really irate, and you can see in some of their responses here. Unlike you, us Irish know a brilliant guitarist when we see one. No, I think you'll find he was the Irish Rory Gallagher. So fans feel like this is a personal attack, implying that to be Irish means to be forgotten, second best, underrated. And O'Donnell notes that these are traits that have been perpetuated by the dominance of Britain in the country's turbulent history. Another bone of contention is the false Jimi Hendrix quote. So apparently Jimi Hendrix was asked once, what does it feel like to be the best guitarist in the world? And he said, I don't know, you should ask Rory Gallagher. But no footage or evidence has ever been found that this existed, and it's become somewhat of an urban legend now within fan communities. But again, fans get really annoyed by this, particularly Irish fans. So you can see here, not this shit again, or Rory doesn't need approval from some non-Irish guitarist, his talent speaks for itself. And in other cases linked to this are Irish people expressing anger that he's often overlooked in lists of the best guitarists because of his nationality. So if Rory Gallagher had been British, not Irish, the ranking of guitar legends would be entirely different. And another point that often comes up is about Rory being asked to join the Rolling Stones. So apparently he was asked to come over and jam with them, with the potential of joining them. But after the jam, he said, oh no, I need to go off now and do my tour in Japan. And he had no intention of ever joining them. So again, Irish fans use this as an opportunity really to make comments and attacks on the Rolling Stones, but framing their identity. So here, Jagger doesn't want to admit he was stood up by an Irishman. So again, foregrounding the idea of the Irish being seen as second best or inferior. And because of this, Jagger's too embarrassed to admit that he was refused by Rory. And then the massive bone of contention here is calling Rory British or English. So Rory is Irish, not British, you fucking idiot. Rory was born free of the crown in the Republic of Ireland. And this is not necessarily non-Irish fans' fault, because in the international press, successful Irish sports stars and musicians are often called British, even if they come from the Republic. Therefore, it's likely that many non-natives are influenced by these dominant cultural messages, rather than deliberately trying to annoy Irish fans. However, they're promptly reminded that to be a true fan of Rory, they must have a clear understanding of where he comes from. So linked to the sources of tension that I mentioned on the previous slide is the importance of pronunciation and accent for fans. And there's probably nothing more important than the correct pronunciation of Rory's surname. So as you'll see in some of the comments here, it's Gallagher, not Gallagher, Gallagher. The second G is silent. So within this fan community, to pronounce Rory's surname incorrectly calls into question a fan's authenticity and their level of commitment to fandom, and in turn, their level of cultural capital within the community. Another issue for many fans is the accent of Rory's nephew. So Rory's nephew, Daniel, and Rory's brother, Donal, are custodians of his music, and often they'll do videos on the channel when a new release comes out. But Rory's nephew was born in London, and so of course he has an English accent, not an Irish accent. And so you get questions like, what happened to his accent? He sounds English. His accent is more English than Irish. So here there's a tension that develops between Daniel's authenticity as Rory's nephew, but his lack of authenticity because he doesn't have an Irish accent. And the strong reactions of fans indicate how accent is integral to authenticity and offers a way for members to strategically mobilize their own ethnic identity and position themselves as experts. Rory's accent as well is often commented upon. So fans talk about how he draws attention to certain words that are pronounced in a Cork accent, that his Cork is really coming out here. That soft Cork accent is so charming. What a rich Cork accent. And often fans themselves will stress that they come from Cork, and that's how they're able to recognise the accent and certain features. So like with national identity, regional identity has strong links with authenticity and enables more subtle hierarchies to develop within the fandom. So within Irish fans, you see people from Cork being seen as more authentic. And linked to this Corkness, you'll get comments like, here's my fellow Corkman. Long may we of Cork remember him. We of Cork adore Rory. So again, writers deliberately positioning themselves alongside Rory and fellow fans from Cork through the use of the first person pronoun to create a feeling of togetherness and help them gain authority amongst fans. However, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, Rory was in fact born in Donegal, and so you get a lot of fans from Donegal also claiming to be more authentic than the fans from Cork because they come from his birthplace of Ballyshannon man. He's from Donegal, the forgotten county. Gallagher is a pure Donegal surname. And even these comments will get rebuffed by Cork people from Cork, sorry. So you can see, no, Cork is Rory's hometown. We of Cork claim Rory as our own. And in these cases, you get a really interesting thing that takes place where then fans resort to their knowledge of Rory to trump other fans. So this comes up in an example of there was a petition to get Cork Airport renamed Rory Gallagher Airport, but Rory was notoriously terrified of flying. And so when Cork fans talk about this plan for the airport to be renamed, the fans from Donegal then say, no, that's not a good idea because Rory was scared of flying. This is terrible. And so you get this conflict where, the Irishness isn't enough. They then need to top this up with the insider knowledge to try and trump the other fans and be seen as more authentic than them. The second theme that I identified was politico-religious memories and mythology. Studies of football fans in Ireland have found that football stadiums are sites of public displays of political affiliation and tension. And to a certain extent, so is music, because Ireland has a history of the rebel songs, the 60s folk revival, punk, all of which allowed musicians and fans to express political identities. However, surprisingly, the Rory Gallagher YouTube channel is a site of mutual respect between fans that are Catholic and Protestant, Unionist and Nationalist, and all seem to be united in their love for Rory. And this is somewhat reflective of Rory's own philosophy, because he never got drawn into debates or commentaries about the Troubles or about his own particular feelings on Ireland. And he was one of the only musicians to continue playing Belfast throughout the period of the Troubles. and often in very difficult circumstances. So his gig in 1971, for example, 10 bombs went off during the concert around the city, where he continued to play, and he would go back every year, saying he didn't see any reason why he shouldn't. And there's a really nice quote from Melody Maker that I'm going to read out here. In 1971, it says, 2,000 people, together as one, no minority, no troublemakers, no inhibitions. You just wanted to take the lid off the walls from around this hall and put it on a huge platform, raise it above the city, and let everyone see it and hear it. So for the people of Belfast, Rory provided them with temporary relief from the fears and divisions that tore the city apart. And while concepts of Irishness were extremely divisive outside of the concert hall, within, a type of polysemic Irishness was encouraged, an Irishness that was not bound with geography, religion, or politics, but was fluid, malleable, and heavily anchored in music and collective memories, enabling all other connotations to be temporarily suspended. You can see some of the quotes on screen here that show, all these years later, how important this is to fans. Rory was a beacon of light through those dark days in Belfast. R.I.P. Rory, you never forgot Northern Ireland. He brought our community together through the bad times. He lit up UK's Beirut, a sad grey city full of hate, bombs and shootings, and so on. And Rory's defiance of political and religious boundaries went far beyond the island of Ireland. So he also played Spain several times during Franco's regime, as well as Poland, Hungary, Yugoslavia, and East Germany in the 80s. And comments from fans from those countries also show that the significance is felt today. This idea of the temporary suspension of politics and religion, the collectivism of fandom and music as a healing force. But also in this theme is this idea of the mythologization of Rory Gallagher. So Green, in his study of collective memory and music festivals, argues that iconic meanings do not arise from the bare facts of an event, but through a process of mythologization. And this seems to be the case with the Rory Gallagher YouTube channel. So there's many comments that make reference to Irish mythology and place Rory within it. So he's described as Ireland's High King, a modern-day Cuchulainn, his robes as flannel shirts and jeans, his sword as a flaming strap, and his throne as a stage. So in this way, fans are emphasizing that Rory is a high king because he was able to temporarily unite the north and the south of Ireland through his music. And this hyperbole embeds him in the roots of Irish history and mythology, while also simultaneously placing him at the forefront of a new history of Ireland as a contemporary high king with the power to break down religious and political barriers. And I really like the idea of the modern day Cuchulainn, because it's this symbol of a perfect warrior, an ideal protector of his people, and again someone whose life was adventurous but tragically short. So Rory's also mythologized in these comments about his talent that become increasingly elaborate and almost superhuman. So I heard that he changed a string mid-song and kept on playing. Rory played so loud that he put a crack in the Ulster Hall ceiling. I once saw Rory keep playing while retuning his guitar and drinking a beer. And funnily enough, while these do seem like very hyperbolic comments, actually some of them are true. I've spoken to fans that confirm this, or I've seen footage, particularly the string change during a song. But it's really interesting how, these stories almost become mythologized and told into this tale. So another important factor is the transformation of sites into pilgrimage landscapes. So you get this with places like Graceland and Elvis Presley, but similarly with Rory Gallagher, sites in Cork or in Ballyshannon become mythologized in this way. So his grave in St. Oliver's Cemetery, there's a statue of him in Ballyshannon, and they become shrines where fans congregate to leave offerings and feel momentarily closer to him. The holiness of these sites is not so much about their religious connections, but rather the ritualistic behaviours, attitudes and actions of fans towards them. And these sites become socio-cultural spaces where fans, both Irish and non-Irish, can perform their Irishness through a deep spiritual connection with Rory and his homeland. And even non-Irish people feel that they become momentarily Irish when they're sitting at Rory's graveside talking to him, for example, or listening to his music there. So in this case, Irishness is more about an emotion, a feeling that's channeled through their deep love for Rory. And you can see this in the comments. So as a native of Cork, it's my duty to visit Rory's grave regularly. Or this was a non-Irish person, I must visit the Promised Land one day, the place that gave birth to such a unique human being. So again, it's very much embedded in mythology, religion, this idea of Ireland as a promised land. Then similarly linked to this is the idea of Christian symbology. So fans often refer to Rory as the god, saint, angel, apostle, priest, crusader of the blues. His strat is described as the Holy Grail, and his music as manna from heaven. And interestingly, these words are used not so much because of Rory's guitaring ability, but because of his gentle demeanour and his relatively straight lifestyle. So it was well known that Rory didn't get involved with drugs, didn't smoke cigarettes, he didn't get involved with groupies, didn't tend to party, often retreated back to his hotel room to read books or watch movies after concerts. And his bandmates and his brother often described him as living a monastic life, so entirely dedicated to his music as his vocation and forsaking all else, including intimate relations with others. So these religious undertones almost become elevated to a cultural level in this context, where they become secularized and separated from their original context of use. So here, conventional religious ideology is separated from Irishness, and instead it becomes heavily bound up with music and Rory as a person, offering a level playing field for everybody, regardless of their beliefs away from YouTube. So the only time that politics overtly creeps into discussions on the Rory Gallagher YouTube channel is in reference to the blues and Rory's affinity with them. And these discussions tend to be about the history of oppression in Ireland by the British and the subsequent political turmoil. So you'll see comments here such as, given our history, us Irish feel the world's pain more acutely. It's unsurprising in our country that kills and is full of hate. Blues comes from poverty, hardship and discrimination. Familiar? So here, for fans, the blues and Irishness go hand in hand, both feeding off of the other and intimately connected. But for other people, Rory's affinity with the blues is more linked to his own state of mind. So Rory suffered from various mental health problems throughout his life, and so people feel that the blues was more about him expressing his own emotional state of mind. So for example, you can tell he was lonely and the blues were his reaction to this. In a few notes of blues, he could express feelings that he couldn't express in person. Rory spoke through his guitar. You only have to listen. So here it's not so much about Irishness, but about the blues being an intimate part of Rory as a person. The third theme that I've identified is tokens of Irishness. In her study of Irishness in New Zealand, McCarthy noted the importance of material tokens of ethnic identity for Irish immigrants. And she claimed that Irish cultural practices relating to food and drink, dress and music were all promoted as elements pertinent to displays of Irishness. Non-Irish people, on the other hand, tended to articulate Irish stereotypes and manipulate them for political or rhetorical purposes. These challenges between expressions of pride and perpetuations of stereotypes can clearly be found on the Rory Gallagher YouTube channel. So non-Irish fans tend to use tokens of Irishness from an impartial distance, but their ideas are often distorted and rely on surface level understandings of what Irishness is. Irish fans, in contrast, tend to write more profound statements that delve deeper into the Irish temperament. So one of these themes is alcohol. So there's a stereotype of Irish people consuming large amounts of alcohol. And so non-Irish fans tend to seek authenticity by drawing connections between Rory's Irish identity and nationality and traditional Irish drinks. So you'll see comments like, whenever I hear Rory, I get a strong desire for Irish whiskey. I'm here with a pint of Guinness listening to Rory, enjoying the black stuff right now. So in other words, fans feel that if they listen to Rory while drinking Irish drinks like whiskey or Guinness, then they're truly authentic. But another thing that non-Irish fans do is kind of pull on these loose connections that they have with Ireland, whether it's through a surname or a distant relative. So you'll see here, I'm not from Ireland, but my surname is Irish. I'm Irish to the bone. My mum's maiden name is Gallagher. So it's kind of an Irishness by proxy, where again they feel more authentic as fans if they assert some kind of link with Ireland. And emojis are also used in this way, and interestingly, they're used more by non-Irish fans than Irish fans. So the use of shamrocks, the use of Irish flags. Whereas Irish people tend to use things like check-in locations. So greetings from Dublin, Ireland. Hello from Cork, the land of Rory. So in this way, the mere fact of being born or living in Ireland authenticates their claim to fandom. And by stating this overtly on the channel, they let everybody know. Another thing that I found is Irish people expressing shame of coming from Ireland and having only just discovered Rory's music. So you get comments like, as an Irish girl, I'm so embarrassed that I've only just discovered Rory. To my shame as an Irishman, I only discovered Rory last year. So in these assertions, knowing about Rory Gallagher is presented as an innate fact and an innate aspect of being Irish, implying that those who don't know about him are a failure to their country and its culture. But even if these people are newcomers to the music, the simple fact of being Irish automatically gives them more authenticity and a higher level of cultural capital than the non-Irish fans. Something else that is common is making links with other Irish musicians. So you get comments like Rory, Gary, Phil, great power trio, in reference to Gary Moore and Phil Lynott, of course. Or can you imagine the jam session in heaven with Rory, Gary, Phil? So these positive remarks, and then you get these negative remarks like, how is Rory overshadowed by fucking Edge? Why all this talk about U2? Rory and Lizzie are way better. So here, associating Rory with other Irish icons serves several purposes. For Irish fans, it's an expression of pride and a desire to firmly stamp Ireland's place in the annals of rock history. But for non-Irish fans, it stems more from a need to gain approval and acceptance amongst Irish fans. It also serves as a bonding mechanism, particularly when comments critique less talented musicians and single Rory out as unique. And given the context in which they're created, these musical tokens of Irishness are deemed more acceptable than other tokens that fall back on lazy stereotypes or ill-judged remarks, particularly those in reference to alcohol. While countries cannot be reduced to a set of oversimplified ideas, Irish fans on YouTube frequently conduct homebound assessments of what they consider to be Irish aspects of Rory's identity. Things like being down to earth, humble, reserved, hard-working, with a touch of stubbornness, and use stories about Rory to exemplify these traits. And given that these comments are shown publicly, they serve a kind of ambassadorial function, serving to create a good impression of Irish people for non-Irish fans. And we can see examples on the screen here, so related to different aspects of Rory's identity. So the idea of being humble, a real Irishman, so humble, the true manifestation of Irishness, pure Irish humility in that casual dress and guitar. And again about being down to earth, so he never forgot where he came from, a proper Irishman, totally devoid of ego, in a simple checked shirt and jeans. And being hardworking, so pure hardworking Irish soul, polite, So extremely well brought up, a true gentleman, eloquent, modest, respectful, cultured. And there's also comments about being moralistic or old-fashioned, because Rory was known never to swear. He was very respectful towards women, so he always stood up when they walked in, for example. And all of these things are referenced in comments, but they're made to be an innate aspect of Irishness, not just something unique to him. And again, the idea of being shy, so such a gentle, soft-spoken Irishman. Incredible how self-effacing he is. And even the idea of his clothing is linked to an Irishness. So the idea that he wore a plain check shirt and jeans throughout his career. And there's a comment actually from a Belfast promoter, Sam Smith, who joked, that he never changed it. He was always wearing the same check shirt throughout his career. And people describe it here as a kind of an Irishness, the idea of, why would you bother dressing up or buying fancy clothes when a simple shirt and jeans is enough? You don't need anything more than that. And they even link this to Rory's guitar. So he had the same Fender Stratocaster throughout his career and never changed it. And there was even a time when Fender gave him a new guitar because, I don't know, maybe they felt embarrassed about the state of his guitar and thought he couldn't afford another one. But he accepted it and didn't use it, carried on using his same old guitar. And in an interview, he famously said, in Ireland, people don't lose their balance that easily. As in, why would I need another guitar? Mine works perfectly. It might not look great, but there's nothing wrong with that. And again, this is something picked up by Irish people in the comments. This idea that, you make do with what you've got. There's no need to change that. And other comments on YouTube tend to relate to the Irish way of life. In particular, things like the gypsy lifestyle, which is what Rory often described his lifestyle as himself. So Irish fans regularly draw parallels between Rory's constant touring and the lifestyle of a traveller, describing the restlessness that he often said he felt when he wasn't on tour as an inherent part of his Irishness. So to them, Rory's enjoyment of life on the road is a reflection of his deep Irish roots and fits with the romanticised image of travellers in the popular imagination as people who freely roam around the land in horse-drawn carriages, playing music. And interestingly, when Rory was asked about this in an interview, he said, that he loved the gypsy lifestyle, but that it was inspired by his own fascination for the Wild West rather than Ireland. But for fans instead, it becomes recontextualized as an inherent form of Irishness. So quotes such as an Irishman, Rory lived for travelling. Like all good Irish, Rory loved the circus. And then a quote from his song Tattooed Lady, spent my youth under a canvas roof as I roamed from town to town. Pure gypsy Rory. And another aspect tied up with this gypsy lifestyle is the idea of superstition. So Rory was an extremely superstitious person. He followed horoscopes. He avoided going out on Friday the 13th. He wouldn't put shoes on a table or enter a room with a crooked picture frame. Had a fear of certain numbers. But again, for fans, this superstition becomes tied up with Irishness more generally and being an innate part of being Irish. And particularly on songs that Rory wrote that link to superstition, so songs like Jinxed, there's comments like this. This completely sums up Rory and his attitude to life. He could never escape that Irish superstition. Seems he was talking about himself. Us Irish are a superstitious bunch. So in this way, Rory's superstition becomes romanticised as an Irish tradition and an element of authentic Irishness, and serves as a way for Irish fans to assert expertise on Irish culture and distinguish themselves from non-Irish fans. And the other aspect of the Irish way of life is Catholicism. So I spoke before how it was used in a way of mythologizing, but there's other examples where it's much more used to link to Rory as a person and also Irish life more generally. So such comments as, his faith was a huge part of who he was. Good old Catholic guilt rearing its head, in reference to certain lyrics in his songs. His experience at the Christian Brothers School stayed with him. look at Blister on the Moon. And this was in reference to the fact that he was beat quite heavily by the priests at Christian Brothers School, and Blister on the Moon seems to cover that experience. So again, fans are drawing upon Catholicism, linking it to Rory's own life, and then spreading this out as a wider kind of feeling and association of Irishness and what Irishness is. So to conclude, it would seem that while Irishness was never something to which Rory overtly drew attention, for fans it's become a key way of expressing authenticity and gaining status within the community. However, the type of Irishness that they promote is multifaceted and multi-layered. On the one hand, Irishness is non-sectarian, casting aside political and religious differences and embracing Rory as a figure who united the island of Ireland through his music. On the other, Irishness determines internal hierarchies, with fans from Cork viewed as the most authentic, although this claim for authenticity is regularly challenged by fans from Donegal. For the Irish, a person's authenticity as a Rory fan is tied up with many factors of Irishness, including national and regional accent, proficiency in the Irish language, knowledge of Irish politics, religion and culture, mythology, and a deep understanding of the Irish character. And these insider pieces of knowledge can be exclusionary for non-Irish fans and make it challenging for them to pursue legitimate claims of Irishness and in turn of authentic fandom. Despite these challenges, some non-Irish fans make attempts at transnational forms of Irishness, claiming Rory as an international icon or relying on tokens of Irishness based on stereotypes to demonstrate their understanding of Irish culture. Through their annual pilgrimages to Rory's grave and their framing as Ireland as a promised land, they also seek to legitimise Irishness as an emotion or feeling rather than a nationality, claiming belonging by proxy. While there's a friendly rivalry between Irish and non-Irish fans, the banter serves as playful nationalism, embedded in pride that such a talented musician is Irish, rather than any malice towards outsiders. The only time that tensions arise is when Rory is labelled as British, for which non-Irish fans are quickly required to apologise in order to repair face and restore the congenial atmosphere on the channel. So overall, the Rory Gallagher YouTube channel is an insightful window into how Irishness can be interpreted, adopted, and recontextualised by fans in a bid for authentic fandom. For a man who tried to live his life under the radar, Rory's fans are ensuring that he remains firmly in the spotlight, using their comments to build a collective legacy that anchors him in Irishness and establishes him as a man who put Ireland on the global stage for music. Thank you so much for listening, and I really look forward to hearing your comments and taking your questions. And for those of you who stuck it out so long, I leave you with a clip from the master himself. Thank you.